Hi everyone, it's Gloria here from DS18. I am just going to leave my computer on and put it on mute so that everyone is able to slowly join. And for those of you that are there, there is download data, which I have added the link to. So if everyone could go ahead and download that data in the next 5 minutes, it just links to the US Superstore data and then connect that to your Tableau so that when we start, everyone's ready to go. Thanks so much. Hi everyone, I've had a couple of people ask me to double check the sound, so do let me know whether you can hear me fine. Just maybe send a message in the chat box to confirm. Perfect. So I might actually just go ahead and start. There might be some extra people who trickle in. It's good to see so many people joining today. So my name is Gloria and I'm a trainee Tableau consulting analyst at the Data School. And I'm going to be delivering this webinar on parameter and parameter actions. If you have any questions at all during the session, then please go ahead and post them into the chat box, and I'll aim to stop halfway through and address any questions that are posted. And then at the end, I can run through those questions again as well. So just in terms of parameter and parameter actions, this is going to be an intermediate session on that, but hopefully anyone should be able to follow through. I'll take you through a step-by-step guide of what we're going to be going through. So before starting, I'd just like to provide a little bit of an overview in terms of what are parameter actions. So parameter actions are a user-generated value. They're a great way of letting the user of a specific dashboard determine what is in their view. And as a result, it provides for really great user flexibility and interactivity. This will make a lot more sense when I go through some examples with you all shortly. So some use cases for parameters. There are a whole wide range of use cases, but to touch briefly on some, there are adjustable reference lines, so you can dynamically update those reference lines. You're able to use parameters to dynamically filter, so you may choose to look at the top 10 or top 5 or top 30 products, as we'll see later. And it also provides a really great way of switching between different metrics being used on Tableau, as well as dynamic sorting. So these are just some of the use cases. There are, of course, many more. I'll take you through all of these ones and then some additional extra ones as well. And hopefully you will learn something from that. So in terms of parameters themselves, there are really 3 necessary components of any parameter. So that is to create the parameter, it's to show the parameter in the control panel, and then to use the parameter in a calculated field, and then that calculated field is what you'd use in the view. So each step of building a parameter we'll go through, we'll be repeating these steps, so hopefully by the end of it they'll be quite well ingrained, and they'll feel like second nature. Parameter actions, on the other hand, are the ways in which you engage with the parameters that you set when it comes to either on your dashboard or on your worksheets. Setting these up are fairly straightforward. Few simple clicks, and that should do it. And that again increases the user interactivity. So I'm going to go ahead and give a couple of examples of parameters, and then I'm going to talk you through how it is. Sorry, I think I lost my screen there. I'm going to talk you through how it is that we're doing them. So here you can see that there is a parameter that has a reference line, and the reference line is being dynamically updated. So for example, we can change the value in this box we have here on the right-hand side that specifies a target range. So just to beforehand to highlight, so in this view, we're looking at subcategory, and we're looking at sales of various different subcategories on the Superstore. So just to show you, we can dynamically update that. If we add in 200,000, for example, you will see that the reference line, 20,000, sorry, we will see that the reference line dynamically updates. So I'm going to talk you through some of these examples, including adding reference lines with colors to show and distinguish between sales that are above a reference line and below. I'm also going to talk you through different ways of visualizing similar content, whether that's through a line graph, a dual access one, or adding in different dimensions also into the view. So let me just go ahead and open Tableau. So we want to connect to the Superstore data. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't know if you've all seen the link. If you go ahead and just connect up to US Superstore, any problems with that, do let me know. So in order to create a reference line and one that dynamically updates, we want to pull in our sales from the measure shelf here. So we want to take our sales and we want to go ahead and place that onto the column shelf. We then want to go ahead and grab our subcategory, which you'll see is in the dimensions pane. And we want to pull that over. We want to add it to rows. So we can see now all the subcategories, sales by subcategory. It's also very good practice to always try and label your sheets. It's also great when looking back at your workbooks to be able to see what it is that you're doing in that. So let's go ahead and label this a reference line. You might even want to mention that it's a dynamic reference line. So now that we have that, we would like to go ahead and click on the analytics pane and go ahead and select a reference line and take that reference line and you're going to drop it onto the table. So what you'll see is the reference box pop up. So we're obviously looking at reference lines, so we're leaving that there, and we want to have the reference line going across the entire table. So under the scope, we're going to leave entire table clicked. And you'll see that there is a next section which is looking at the values. Now there's a range of different ways to create parameters. I'll show you one way now and I'll show you another way later when it comes to reference lines, but you can go ahead and select from your values and you can actually hit create a parameter. So we're going to go ahead and create the parameter, open that up, and we're going to call this beats. Why don't we call it beats target? Because that's going to allow us to see whether the sales beat a specific target. So we'll name that beats target. And we're going to leave this as a float because we're dealing in numbers for our values. And we're going to go ahead and create a range. Now, the minimum is, of course, the minimum range that you'd like to see. Let's assume, for example, that we may only be interested in any sales above 50,000. So if we go ahead and put in 50,000 there, we might want to say that given our data set goes to, at the moment, around, I think, 300,000, let's go ahead and maybe add in 350. And the step size is when that parameter control dialog box pops up on the right-hand side, which you'll see shortly. It allows the user to determine basically what steps of values they want to see. So do you want to jump in 50,000? Do you want to jump in 10,000? Do you want the user to be able to increase by $1 US each time? So it depends on obviously what you're using your dashboard for. But for our case, let's just go ahead and set the step size to 10,000. Once that's been done, just hit OK. And then in terms of formatting, let's maybe just give our reference line a slightly different format. Go ahead and let's select the broken up rows, the top one, and let's maybe make it one of these shades of gray. You can pick as you wish. So once you've done that, you can go ahead and select OK. And then now the parameter will appear here on the right-hand side. So when you are adjusting the values, you should be able to have your reference line dynamically update. So now what I'm going to do, now that we've created that initial reference line, and you can see it dynamically update, we may wish to be able to see what is above and below the reference line and distinguish between those based on a specific color. So if you want to go ahead and duplicate the sheet so that we can have them set out in different stages. And we want to call this a dynamic reference line with color. Okay. So in terms of creating a color, we want to go and select a calculated field here from the drop down. You see a calculated field, select that open, and let's call this our target color calculated field. So in order to create the color, what we want to do is we want to tell Tableau that we want it to do something if the sales is above the target line. So in order to do that, we're going to go to the column shelf. You can either add this in directly, so you can add in, your sum of sales, or, which is my preferred method, you can just go ahead and drag in the relevant value into the calculated field, and then say if the sum of sales is greater than, and you'll take in your parameter, which is either your beat target or whatever you've specifically named it, and you go ahead and drop that in to the calculated field. What you're telling Tableau is you want it to do something. It's creating a true and false, so it's saying this is true when the sales target beats, when the sum of sales beats the target, and it'll also create a false as a result of that. So go ahead and click OK. And that calculated field will now appear in your measures shelf. So if you take that and you drop that on color, you'll see here on the right-hand side, it has created a true and false, true for everything that is above the reference line and false for everything that's below. So now when you update your parameter, you should be able to see, for example, if we add in, if we go to a drop down, so we want to go to a type in option. If you want to type in 200,000, you'll see that the reference line dynamically updates along with the colors corresponding to those that are above and below. So that's a really great way of helping the user to visualize what they're looking at in the field, to split down the view and make it more digestible. And then of course you can, as per personal preference, just go ahead and change your colors. So potentially there may be cases where you would like the information on truths, for example, to pop out in a certain color, and maybe you want the falses to fade into the background a little bit. So you can select a lighter color. In this case, we'll go for the Seattle grays and choose the light Seattle gray. And the other colors sort of, the falses sort of fade into the background there. So building on this slightly, we're going to look at a sales comparison chart. So let's open this up and call this sales comparison. And for this, as I showed you earlier, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what it is I'm talking you through, you'll be able to see here, we're going to look at this chart here. So in order to do this, Let's go ahead and grab the order date under the measures pane. And if you drag that out and place it on columns, let's change that from a discrete, discretes are listed in this top section, to a continuous by quarter. And then we're going to go and add on sales like we were looking at before and add that onto rows. Now you'll have noted on the different, on the other worksheet that I showed you, there were different marks on the line graph. We had circles, but we also had the line graph. So in order to create those, we're going to have to create a dual axis chart. So if you take the sum of sales on the rows, you hold down your control key and you drag and drop it below, you'll see that we create a second line chart underneath. So for that, we're going to change. If we click on the line chart below, you'll see that over here, the sum of sales is updated to be dealing with the corresponding line chart. So if you go ahead and convert that second one to a circle, and then what we can do is, if you right-click on the axis, we can create a dual axis chart. And then if you right-click on the axis again, we're going to want to choose to synchronize the axis. So at the moment, you can see there's actually two axes on here. We don't want both, we just need the one. So if you right-click again, go down to the show headers, and you can untick the show headers, and that will just leave us with the one. Now we created, and in the top shelf here that's dealing with the line chart directly, we maybe want to go ahead and change that color to a gray. Make sure you're not on the all mark shelf because that's going to change the color of all of it. So just go ahead and set the first one to gray. So now you can see it's starting to build up. So we had already created a parameter earlier when looking at whether something beat a target or not. So we can actually just use that same parameter. So rather than recreate it, I'm just going to go and edit for anyone who maybe missed how to do that exactly. And so we're going to keep that parameter. Close that, and as I mentioned, for one of the components for a parameter is to be able to show the parameter control, because without the parameter control, a user is not going to be able to interact with that. So you can see that the parameter control now pops up on the right-hand side of the workbook. And as before, we had also created a reference line. So if we go ahead and take the reference line, and we're going to drop it onto the sales table so that it goes across. It's going to pop up there. We're going to insert in the beat target parameter. Again, you might choose to change the format of that, potentially doing something similar to what we did before. Select OK. Now you'll see at the moment that we may choose to have the beat target written there, but we might not want to have the beat target on both sides of the axis. So if you want to remove that, just go ahead and click Format. And if you go to the alignment, if you choose one specific side, then you'll see that the text is updated only on one side. You can also change it so that your parameter, if you edit the reference line, you may wish, instead of having the title, which is whether it beats the parameter, you might choose to have the specific value that you've inserted. And you'll notice here when you do that, that will update with the quantity added in my beat target parameter, and it will be listed now, that value. But I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as computation so that I can see my title. So in a similar vein to what we did before, we want to tell Tableau that anything above or below the reference line has to be distinguished differently. So like before, we have our target color calculated fields. You can open that up so again everyone can see what that was. And what we were doing is we were telling Tableau that anything that is above or below the reference line, distinguish it differently. So if you select OK, and then again you take that target color calculated field, and you want, so in this case, just to clarify as well, you don't want to be dropping it on all of the shelves. You want to specifically be dropping it on the marks card that's dealing with the circles. So that was the second one there. Make sure that it's the one that has circle listed, and then go ahead and select the target color calculated field and drop it on the color. And you'll, in this case, we may wish to actually keep our color as blue. So let's change that false to blue. Let's hit OK. And now again, you'll see that as we change our parameter, our reference line dynamically updates and the corresponding colors reflecting whether it's above or below the reference line also dynamically updates. So moving on to the next example, we're going to go through looking at, oh, it's also worth mentioning on parameter. So obviously you can of course add a reference line. The issue is with just adding a reference line is that the user won't be able to interact with that. You'll be able, as the individual who's created the dashboard, be able to say this is the average reference line, or this is what I want to set as the target. But the person looking with and engaging with that dashboard won't be able to update it. So in order to do so, you really have to create a parameter to be able to give the end user that control. So now go ahead and open a new worksheet. And in this case, we're going to call it a highlight line, because as you'll see, we're choosing the options to highlight a specific color in that line. So in order to do this, we're going to again look at the order date in the dimensions pane, and we're going to pull in the order date and drop that onto columns. Again, we don't want that to be discrete, we want that to be continuous. So if you right click on the drop down just here, you'll be able to select month from the continuous section, which will update it. We're then going to pull in sales once more down here under the measures and place that on the rows. And then we're going to go ahead and create a, oh sorry, we're going to drop as well, because for this, let's say what we're doing is we're using a parameter to highlight. Let's go for the category selected. Let's just make that bolder. Right. So in order to do this, we want to go to this drop down up here near the dimensions again. And as always, go and select create a parameter. And let's call this select category. Because the categories, there are a number of different options within the categories. On US Superstore, there's furniture, there's office supplies, and there's technology. So we want to go ahead Hi everyone, sorry, I think I just lost you there. So can you just quickly confirm that you're still there? Perfect, sorry about that, my computer cut out. Okay, so to pick back up where we left off, we are creating a parameter for a category. So if we go ahead and label your parameter as select category and then set the data type to a string. We then want to allow all values through a list. And because we're looking at the category dimension, we can just go ahead and click the Add from Field box where I'm highlighted and then select category. And what you'll see now is that the options in category fill that drop-down list. So the value here and how it will be displayed on the parameter itself. If you want to change the name in which a specific parameter is displayed, you can just go ahead and edit that there. For now, we're going to leave as is. So just go ahead and click OK. It's also worth noting that I didn't actually drop beforehand the category onto the view. So if you take your category and you drop it onto detail, you'll see that those categories are now added to the view. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the select category that I had created. And I want to, as always, show the parameter control. You'll see that now pops up on the side. And at the moment, if you try and select one of those drop downs, that's actually not going to update. The reason that's not going to update is because we haven't told Tableau what we want it to do with the parameter. So if we try and click technology, nothing's going to happen. So if we go back to the dimensions pane and we click create calculated field, let's call this calculated field category calculated field. And then we're going to say if our select category, well, we want our select category to equal our category. So that should be coming up with valid. And then click OK. And then drop that true false that will appear in the dimensions pane this time. Because it's dealing with a string, it's going to move to the dimensions pane. Whereas before, because we were looking at numeric values, it moved into the measure shelf. So go to, I also see a spelling mistake, which is going to bug me unless I fix it. Category. Right, so drag that category calculated field onto the color shelf. Let's open up the color, click edit. And again, kind of like we did before, we're going to want the falses to sort of appear into the background. So if you select the Seattle Grays and click the lightest one, and then for the trues, let's go ahead and maybe select a red so it pops out a little bit. You'll notice now that when you shift between the different categories, that line and the color that's being selected will and should, if ideally it's been done right, update. So now we've looked at creating the dynamic reference line. We've looked at adding a color to the dynamic reference line. We've looked at doing that same reference line through a dual axis chart. And we have looked at highlighting anything within a specific dimension on highlighting that on the view. But now let's take a look at what happens if we want to look at different dimensions or different measures. So it's not something like category where there are a range of values within that. It's going to be looking at comparing, say, category to subcategory, or category to, for example, segment. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and create a new worksheet. And let's label this dynamic dimension. So for this, we're going to grab sales again, because why not? We've been looking at sales pretty much most of this session already. So drop the sales into the columns. And then for now, let's add category to the rows. And the category is under the dimensions pane. So grab that and add that into the rows. And then we want to create a calculated field, a parameter. So go to the dimensions drop down and select create parameter. And let's call this select a dimension. And like before, when we were looking at category, we want to set this data type to a string. And we want to create a list of values. Now, because we're pulling in different dimensions, we're not going to go to the add from field, because what that's going to do is it's going to populate it with everything within that specific dimension, whereas we want to compare across dimensions. So let's just select some from the dimensions pane in front of us. Maybe we can choose category and just manually type that in. Let's choose segment. And let's choose to look at ship mode. So category, segment, and ship mode, you'll see the value and the display value comes up as well. Once you've done that, click OK. And then for the next stage, we're going to want to create a calculated field. So if we go up here, dimensions pane, click create calculated field. Let's label this dimension chosen. And so there are a range of ways we can create a calculated field on here. We can add if statements, we can add case statements. I'm going to go ahead and add a case statement. So we're saying case, select a dimension. So we're dealing with that parameter and we're saying when category, then, so give us, and we'll take our category section and we'll drop that in, or you can just type in category. And then when, what was the other one we did? Segment. When segment, then give me the segment section. Where was segment? Here it is. So drag in your segment from the dimensions pane. And the last one we had was ship mode. So we'll say when. And again, you're using brackets because when it comes to a string, you need to let Tableau know that you're using it as a string. So you're adding in, sorry, the quotation marks, not the brackets. So then when ship mode, then go up to your dimensions pane. Look for your ship mode and drag that in. So you're basically telling Tableau, to fetch each of these every time it sends the query. And then you're ending that there. So you're saying when the select a dimension parameter is selected, when categories there, then bring in the categories dimension. When segments there, bring in the segments dimension. And when ship mode is referenced, bring in the ship mode dimension. So click OK. And sorry, as before, you want to go back down to your selected dimension and you actually want to, again, show the parameter control. But then at the moment, let me fit this to the entire view. At the moment, that's not going to update because we haven't dragged in the calculated field that we just created. So that calculated field will be in your dimensions pane because again, it's dealing with a string. And let's drag the dimension chosen up onto the row shelf. And let's drag off the category that we had added there before. Just drag that and drop that under the marks pane and it'll disappear. And now Tableau should dynamically update. It's worth mentioning that at the moment, Tableau, if you add in new data and, for example, there were more categories that were added under the category section, you would have had to go into that parameter and manually update that list. In the new version of Tableau that's coming out, that will automatically be updated. So that is a great new feature coming. So I'm just going to change this title again so that you know what you've done. Let's say create a parameter that allows the user to choose the dimension they want to view. Yeah. So maybe bold that so you can see what's being done. So now what happens if we wanted to create an option for the user to not only select a dimension, but also to select a measure. So let's go through that step. Let's duplicate this sheet. And then let's look to add a little bit more information. Let's change this title again to say, now combine the parameter that allows the user to choose a dimension with a parameter that allows the user to select a measure. And let's just add on that we want to make the title dynamic as well, so that it details what's in the view. Okay. So to do that, we do something similar to what we've done with the dimension, but instead of pulling in dimensions, we're actually going to pull in various measures. So once more, go to the drop down next to the dimensions pane and create parameter. And let's call this one select a dimension. Oh, sorry, select a measure. We're going to make this a string. We're going to create a list. And what measure shall we look at? Let's look at profit. Let's look at sales. And let's look at discount. Just leave that there for a second so that everyone can follow. Once you've done that, just go ahead and click OK. And then as before, right click on the parameter and show the parameter control. You'll see that all of the parameters go to the bottom of that of this pane here, so it's very easy to interact with them as long as you know they're there. Next stage, again, the drop down at the top of the dimensions and create a calculated field. We want to call this the measure chosen, like we had the dimension chosen before. And again, we'll create a case statement that says, that brings in the parameter for the measure. So case select a measure, and we're saying when it's discount, then Take our discount, which is here in the measures shelf, drop that in. And we want this to be, we don't want to be summing all the discounts because we don't want to be summing percentages. So go and wrap that in an average so that Tableau knows what to do with it. And then let's continue that sentence. So when sales, then pull in the sum of sales from the columns shelf, drop that in there. And we're saying when it shows profit, then give us the profit, and go to the measures pane on the left-hand side and pull in profit. And again, we want that to be the sum of profit. So let's just wrap that in. So let's end that. Make sure you add an end, select OK. And then again, you'll see that on the column shelf at the moment, we have sales, but we're not just looking at sales, we're looking at 3 different measures. So if we take the measure chosen off the measure shelf, we place it on the column shelf, and we remove the sum of sales, just drop that away. Now you'll see that engaging with the 2 different parameters will allow you to select a range of options when looking at those. Now, if we want to make the title dynamic, then just go ahead and open up the title. Let's go to the end of this, and we want to go to the insert here, the insert drop down, open that up, and we want to insert the parameter for select a measure. So we want to say sales, for example, by, and then we want to put in the dimension. So sales by, insert, select a dimension, and then when we click OK, you'll see here that the title will dynamically update when you switch between different measures and different dimensions. Let's rename this to dynamic dimension and measures. So now what am I going to go through? I'm just going to take a quick look to see if anyone had any immediate concerns. Great. So let's go and create a new sheet. And now we're going to look at the top end filtering. So this is going to allow a user to dynamically update the filtering by adding in a parameter. So I'm just going to give this sheet a title again so that it's clear what we're doing. So create a parameter that allows the user to select the number of products they want to view. Okay. So to do this, let's grab the sales in the measures shelf just here, drop that onto columns. And then this time, let's go ahead and look at product name. So the product name will be under the dimensions pane. Pull out product name and place that on rows. You'll see now that you're getting all of the product names, and there's a fair few of them. So let's just quickly sort that. You can sort by clicking on this icon up here. And then let's create a parameter that's going to allow the user to select what top amount they want to see. So dimensions, drop down option, create parameter. This is going to start feeling quite repetitive in terms of how you're creating those parameters, but once you know that, then it's going to be really, really easy to be creating them on your own as well. So let's call this choose top N products. And because we're looking at whole numbers, let's just make this an integer. And let's look at this across a range. So let's say we're interested in seeing the top 0 to 30 products. And we want the user to be able to move in steps of 1. So looking from 28 to 29 to 30. So once you've got that all in there, click OK. And then as always, go to the drop down on that parameter, click and show parameter control. But then as always, that is not going to update because we haven't told Tableau what we want to do with it. So if we grab the product name that's on the rows shelf, we hold down Control and we drop it on the filters. Then we want to go to the top section. We want to look at it by field. We're looking at the top, but we don't want to see the top 10 because we want the user to be able to interact with that and specify what they consider the top X amount. So on the drop down there, you'll be able to see that you can actually choose top N products, which is choose your parameter. Click OK. Select OK down here. Now you'll see at the moment it's on 1. But as soon as we start changing that parameter on the right-hand side, we can dynamically engage and increase the number of products we're viewing. Again, you could choose to go to the drop down on the parameter control. You could have a type in option instead of a slider. And you can just add in that you want to see the top 12 or the top 8. So for the next one, we'll look at dynamic sorting. I find this one quite interesting. I came across this slightly later during my time at the data school and I really liked it. So let's call this dynamic sorting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I'm just writing these titles in case it helps you when looking back at your workbook, see what it is that you're doing. So we're creating a parameter that allows the user to pick a measure that they want to sort by. So click OK on that. And then let's go and add in profit off the measures pane. Just drag profit into the columns. Let's drag sales into the columns as well. Just drop that next to profit. And then let's also look at discount. Drag in and drop discount onto the columns. And then let's maybe break this down by subcat. So the subcategory in the dimensions pane and drop that into the rows. So that should be the view everyone has. Then we're going to go and create a parameter. And we're going to call this sort by. Again, it's going to be a string because we're going to be pulling on the various different measures up there. I'm going to do a list, and similar to what we had done before when we had added in the different dimensions, the different measures, we're just going to go and write sales, profit, and discount. So has everyone got that? Click OK. We're going to show that parameter control. I'm going to go and create another calculated field, this time called sort by calculated field. And we're going to create another case statement. So case sort by. It's quite weird engaging with this calculated field with this massive mouse cursor. It's definitely a new challenge. So when profit, then, if I can spell, sum of sales. Oh, sorry. If I can spell and if I can think. Profit, and then when sales, then give us the sum. You can also just be dragging these in for the view, from the dashboard. And then we want to say when discount. Then, and let's pull in the average discount and drop that there and end. So this should be seeming fairly straightforward now because we've kind of done this example before. I'm just wondering what I've done wrong here. No bracket. So double check your brackets. I constantly leave out brackets, forget to add them in. So if your calculated field says error, just double check that you've got the brackets in the right place. So if you click OK on that, and then you go up to your rows, and it says subcategory, and then select the sort option. You'll see that there's this pop-up box that says sort by. You want to be sorting by a specific field. And this is when you want to add in your sort by calculated field. And we can drop our measure because we've got quite a few measures on there. Let's take our measure names and drop that onto color on the all marks card. And now we're going in descending order. Let me just reopen up that sort. It's going by descending. You'll see that when you shift between those various different measures, you're going to be telling Tableau, I want you to sort by discount, I want you to sort by sales, or I want you to sort by profit. So in terms of time, I realize we're pretty much out of time. I haven't actually managed to delve into too much, well, in any detail on parameter actions, but they're very straightforward actually. You can engage with them by going to your workbook actions or your dashboard actions and setting them from there. I hope that this session was useful. We're doing a range of other webinars. Other DSers will be teaching a range of topics in both Tableau and Alteryx. In Tableau, they'll be looking at levels of detail and also looking at calculated table calculations. So if you're interested, go on the meet and greet on the Eventbrite for the Data School, and you should be able to see a calendar of when those will be held. I hope that was useful for everyone. I can't see any questions being raised. But if you do have any other questions, then I had my email up at first. Feel free to shoot me a message or shoot me a message on Twitter as well, and be more than happy to respond to all of that. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.